Hi guys. I've had a lot of questions about how to set up these Excel sheets, and so I wanted to walk you through one of the three contracts and get you started, and then hopefully that'll set you up to understand what's going on the other two. So I'm going to start with the buyback contract. It's the first tab. It's the first one we talked about yesterday, so we'll start there. Anything in green, as you can see from over here, green means it's a fixed variable. We don't change it. It comes from the case. This is not a decision. It's just a number. So retail price given in the case, $15. Red-ish cells, these red ones, these are privately known information. So as it says here in the note, the supplier's cost for manufacturing is only known to be something between $2 and $7.50. Now this is going to be an important number as it shows up in your calculations, so we need to put something here as a placeholder for now. Tomorrow the suppliers will be told what their actual manufacturing price is, and they will update this. The retailers will talk with the suppliers during negotiations, and you're going to have your table open, and periodically you might decide that maybe your entire model is based off of a production cost that is higher or lower than seems reasonable given the information you're getting. For example, if the wholesaler offers you a contract with a pass-through price of $3, but you currently have your production cost estimate at $7, then that might indicate that your estimate is off. This is good information for the suppliers to keep private because, of course, once the retailer knows how low you can go, they know how low you can go. So for now, I'm just going to put a number in here. Let's do 5. Transportation cost is given by the supplier. Is given in the case. The wholesale price and the buyback price, purple means contract. This is actually something that you're going to be deciding within your team. So again, I'm just going to put some numbers in here so that we have a value to pull into the rest of the calculations. But we want to make sure that the calculations pull this formulaically. In the formula, we don't want to hard code these in because we want to be able to update this very quickly as we negotiate on Thursday. So for now, I want to set a wholesale price that's something between production cost and retail price. I'm going to set it at 10. 10. And I'm going to set the buyback price for right now. It should be something less than wholesale price, but more than salvage value. We don't have salvage value. So I'm going to go ahead and set this at 2. That's going to be kind of the whole point of Thursday. So we don't know those values yet. Just plug something in that's not going to result in a bunch of negative values showing up elsewhere in your screen. Finally, the adjusted buyback price. In this particular problem, we have a transportation cost. We want to, the retailer has to pay that. So, for example, in the adjusted buyback price, and this is laid out in the that 13-page PDF that's also posted. You can kind of use that as a guide. But the buyback price is going to be either the adjusted buyback price is the buyback price minus the transportation cost, but that can't go negative. So if I have a $1 transportation cost, but my supplier is offering me a 50-cent buyback, it's not worth it to me, right? Because I'm going to spend $1 getting it to them to get 50 cents back. So I'm still going to lose 50 cents. I'm better off just throwing the product away. So the buyback price is going to be the adjusted buyback price is going to be the buyback price minus the transportation cost, but we want to make sure to protect that from looking negative because the retailer's smart, and if it is negative, they're just not going to do it. So then we're going to basically say that it is the maximum of 0 or that calculation. So if that calculation falls below 0, it'll keep it at 0. It won't let it go below 0. Right? So that just protects us. So like I said, if the buyback price then drops to 75 cents, the retailer basically sees it as no buyback option. Right? But if it goes up, then we've got it. So that's a real life complication that many retailers have to think about, that they can't just send things back costlessly. And in this particular contract, that shipping cost is contracted to be paid by the retailer, and so it essentially comes out of the value of their buyback. Of course, the supplier could offer to pay for it too, but they would probably then basically drop the buyback price by the appropriate amount, and so that's essentially what the adjusted buyback price does, is it allows really either one to be considering that they pay for it in some ways. So then we have the demand data. Again, this is red, so that means it's privately known. We do know that demand, if it is weak, is going to be somewhere between 50 and 200. So for now, I'm going to assume 75 just to get so we have something in our table. Intermediate has also a range where it might appear. We need to put in a single number, so I'm going to put in 300. And strong has a range in which it might have a more finalized forecast. So I'm going to throw 3 numbers in here. I have a range where I think they're going to be. On negotiation day, the retailers will be told that the 3 numbers are, whatever. Suppliers won't know, but you will have your guesses in your Excel sheet. And then as you're negotiating, if your retailer keeps coming back with an order size of 900, then clearly the strong case must be more than 800. If they keep dropping their demand below a certain value, you have a pretty good indication that the minimum demand is less than what you have as yours, because there's basically a guarantee of at least 75 sales. So if my retailer comes back and orders something like 50, they're either not thinking very carefully or they know that demand actually can go even lower than this. So I can update it as we're talking. Now the probabilities of each of these scenarios is given again in the case. It's a green value, so it's olive, it's fixed, doesn't change from the case. They're given as 30%, 40%, and 30%. Right, so those are given in the case. The cumulative probability then, this is just that running total. So the likelihood that demand is less than or equal to 75 is 30%. The likelihood that it's less than or equal to the intermediate is 40% plus 30%. Right? So I took the previous total plus the new value that I want to add to this total. Right? And then the probability that it's less than or equal to the strong case is going to be 100%, but it's going to be the new outcome plus the previous total. Right? That's the easiest way to do a running total. And then if this was a very big table, copying that down would be very quick. Okay. Now, as far as the table over here, the sales, shortages, and leftovers, these are not probabilistic values yet. You don't have to do anything too complicated here. These are simply an if-then type statement. So how much will our sales be if demand turns out to be 75? Right? And so in order to know this, we need to have something down here in the retailer's order quantity. Again, this is a purple value. This is what the retailer tells you they're going to order. It's not necessarily what they should order according to your model or even their model. But for now, let's put in that they're going to order 100 units. All right, we need something here. So what we can say then is the sales, if demand turns out to be 75, but they've ordered 100, it's going to be 75, obviously, because you can't sell more than demand. So basically, this is the minimum of demand and order quantity. All right? That's how many we could possibly sell. If demand turns out to be 300, it's the same thing. We're going to sell the minimum of all of the demand or all of our product, right? And in this case, demand is 300, but we only stock 100. We're going to sell 100 units. And the same thing here. But we want to set this up dynamically. We don't want to just calculate it right now in our heads and then enter 100, because if the retailer comes back later and says, actually, I want to order 600, what just happened? If the retailer comes back later and says that they want to order 600 units, then we would want this to update automatically. You do not want to have to go through every time you go back and forth and update your entire thing with every calculation. So now shortages are going to be the same calculation. How many sales do you miss, right? So the sales that you miss is the difference between what demand was and what you ordered. So it's going to be demand, bear with me, minus our order quantity. But we don't have negative 525 missed sales here. What we have is 0 missed sales. So I want to put in again, a maximum of 0 or that number. Right? I'm going to be a little bit more sophisticated at this point and see if I can copy that down. Good. Let's just check our numbers. If I carried 1 unit, nope, see, that didn't work. If I carried 1 unit, why did that stay? Oh, because I put the wrong, I should have had that as B's, not 12s. B. There we go. So that makes sense, right? If we had 1 unit, we would sell 1 unit, but we would have shortages on the rest of our demand. So calculation is correct. Finally, leftover, very similar. The leftover is going to be our order quantity minus what was demanded that period. But again, we can't have negative leftover inventory. That essentially is shortages. So we want to set this, and I'm doing that by just hitting F4, but you can also go in and type the $sign. Right. I don't want negatives. It's not an option. So again, I want it to be the maximum of 0 or the value that gets calculated. Done. So in this case, I have no leftover inventory because I have this ridiculously low number. If I cranked that back up to, say, 600, then under the weak or intermediate, I would have no shortages, but yes, leftovers. Under the strong, because I have 600 in inventory and 100 demanded in this possible scenario, I would have leftover, I would have shortages, I would miss some sales, and have no leftover inventory. Right? So this is hopefully all consistent with how you would intuitively think through the results. Down here then, this blue, this is a calculation. So these are outcomes basically, but we're going to have to calculate them. And so we want to think about what the expected amount of sales are. And this is basically where we finally bring in probabilities. So our expected number of sales is going to be this value times 30% plus this value times 40% plus this value times 30%. Right? And there's more sophisticated ways to do that, but for now we'll do it this way. So basically this is a weighted average of the likely sales outcomes. And we get 322. Now again, check our sort of extreme values here. If I only carry 1 unit, I'm going to sell 1. I have 100% chance of selling 1 unit, basically. Because even if I took this up to 75, the absolute minimum amount of demand in this estimate is 75. So I would expect to sell 75 units. As soon as I go over that, the probabilities start kicking in. So if I carried 80 units, my expected sales are 78.5. There's always the risk that I might have leftover. In fact, there's a very high risk because demand's either 75 or 300, so I will always have 5 units left over in this scenario. But I might sell more here, so it starts to go up. Okay. Shortages, expected shortages, we're going to do the same thing. So it's going to be this outcome times its green likelihood, not its cumulative likelihood, plus this outcome times its likelihood plus this outcome times its likelihood. Done. And if I felt like setting some of those variables with the appropriate $signs, I could save myself a little work here, but I'm almost done. Plus, you can hear my 4-year-old yelling in the background, plus, done, right? Good. Okay, now the rest of these should be relatively easy at this point, so I'm not sure I'm going to go through all of them. But what you can do is we can say from the retailer's perspective, what is the cost of underage, of shortage? And that's going to be the missed sales opportunity. So it's going to basically be P minus W. Relatively easy. The cost of overage is going to be the wholesale price, so we can go back to our formulas, it's going to be the wholesale price minus the buyback, in this case the adjusted buyback value, so $6, which means our critical fractile is going to be shortages or underages divided by the sum of shortages plus underages. Slide this up a little bit. Which means our optimal critical fractile, because this is discrete demand, we know that the 45% mark is what we're shooting for, but we can't hit 45. We can either hit 30, 70, or 1. And so in order to get the 45 mark, we need to look through this table and then find the demand quantity that corresponds to that. And so that's a little bit tricky. I'm going to go over and just make sure I'm doing it in the most efficient way possible. Yeah, just if-then statements. Okay. So basically, we want to look at this and say equals if this value is less than or equal to this value, then 75. Otherwise, parentheses, if open critical fractile is less than or equal to this, then they should order 300 in our case. Otherwise, if open critical fractile is less than or equal to 1, and actually, you know what, we can just skip this whole part because that's always going to be 1. So otherwise, they should order the maximum amount. Right? And I'm going to close all my parentheses and hit enter. Right? So this says that because I only want a 45% service level, 75 is not going to cut it. That's only a 30% service level, so I should go up. Just to kind of play with this, let's see what happens if we move the buyback price way up. That should increase our service level. It does. It takes it to 71, which should then be 800, and that's what we get. If we drop this down a little bit, we get 55. That's in here. It should be 300. It is. If we drop this down to 0, our service level drops to 33. That should still be 300. It is. If I raise my wholesale price even more, I drop my critical fractile to 0.2, so it should be 75. It is. Okay, so my if-then statements are flowing correctly. Okay? And just to show that to you again, I'm going to click on it here. You can see it up here. So if the critical fractile is less than this lowest number, then the lowest demand. If it is less than the middle number, the middle demand. Otherwise, the top demand. Right? And again, as I'm getting information from my retailer and seeing what they're ordering, if I'm the supplier, I might go in here and say, wow, you know, they're really ordering a lot. Maybe this is closer to 400, right? And then that's going to update all of this other information correctly. So then we have our order quantity. This is what they should order. This is what the retailer tells you they want to order. And that's important because we want to, not just think about what we think they should order and how much we think that would make us. We want to actually put in what they are ordering. All right, so the retailer might have some other objective or other information, and so they're ordering something different based off of their understanding of the problem. The supplier's expected revenue then is their total sales. So it's going to equal the wholesale price that they're charging their customer times the number of items that the customer is ordering. So in this case, this purple cell here, B23. Right, that's their income. Their cost is going to be the buyback value. In this case, I've got it set to 0, but let's keep it there. The buyback value times the expected number of leftover units, as well as their production cost. And so their production cost times the total number of units that they have to produce, which is Q. Right. So their costs are going to be production cost, unit cost times quantity, and money that they shell out at the end of the contract, buybacks times number of leftovers, which means that their profit in this scenario is revenue minus, this isn't too tricky, revenue minus costs. Right? And we're going to do the same thing for the retailer. We want to think about their revenue times their sales. So they get $15 times their expected number of sales, and that's their revenue. Right? And actually we could, these two are just sort of here to help you understand what's going on, because this profit value is the actual one of interest. So we could also think about their revenue as being plus the y and plus the buyback value let me try this again, equals their actual sales price times number of sales plus the buyback value, let's do the adjusted buyback value actually, times their average leftover expected inventory, expected leftover inventory, right? So they're going to get that money back as well. In this case, buyback value was 0, so it didn't change our number, but it would if I went up into here and made my buyback suddenly worth, say, $3. Right now, my retailer is protected a little bit more. And the retailer's cost then is going to be their order quantity times the wholesale price that you are offering them, enter. Right? Which means that the retailer's profit is their revenue minus their cost, and the supply chain makes the supplier profit plus retailer profit. These, by the way, are labeled nicely by the people who made the sheet. Done. So we can see that this particular contract, the supplier is benefiting most. The retailer is doing what they're doing here. So if we were to set the buyback to 0, this essentially becomes a wholesale price contract, right? And we can look at this in terms of how the wholesale price results in demand for everybody. And then if we want to play with the buyback price and raise it above 0, we can start to see how different buyback prices would help the supply chain. So for example, if we set this to 11, we can see that the order quantity goes, the optimal order quantity goes up to 400. And oh, I didn't change this. The optimal order quantity goes up to 400. We assume that our retailer does something appropriate. So let's say that they actually order 550. That would tell you maybe that their demand estimate is different than your demand estimate. So you might come in and say like, oh, maybe this is 550, right? Maybe that's what I should be using here. And then you can look and say, wow, the supplier really makes a lot of money on this contract. And we get a lot of profit, and this is a good contract, but the retailer might not be too keen on this 937, and so they might say, you know, how about we do a wholesale price of 9 units and a buyback price of $8.50. Right? That sounds like a good deal to me because I'm a retailer. And then they say, and if you do that, I will order 750 units. Well, from the supplier's perspective, I would look at this and say, oh, you should basically order the maximum amount, and you're telling me you're going to order 750. So I might then go into my own table and say, oh, demand's probably 750 in this strong case, unless they're just trying to trick me. And in any case, when I look at it this way, oh, look what happens to our profits. It's still really high, but the retailer is making more than the supplier. Now you'll notice this is a different number than before. It only stays the same if the contract is always set optimally, right? So right now we're just picking numbers randomly somewhat, and so this is not necessarily the best wholesale price for the system. Right? I didn't follow that formula. I just picked two numbers that were really close together, so the retailer would be really happy. And in fact, if we wanted to get really extreme, we could set the wholesale price at, say, $5.50 and the buyback price at $5.25. And you're going to see that then the optimal order quantity is the maximum demand. I'm going to leave that at $7.50. And actually, the supplier expects to lose money on that contract, and the retailer makes more money actually at the supplier's expense, because the supplier is potentially having to pay a lot of excess inventory back to the supplier, and they didn't make enough money to cover their costs. So of course, if I was the supplier, I would say, yeah, no, that's not going to work, unless maybe my production cost was actually on that lower end, right? Because the retailer doesn't know. So they might throw that out there just to see if I've got a $2 production cost. Because if I did have a really low production cost, this would still be a reasonably possible contract, right? It's not completely unrealistic, but the supplier's not going to be excited about that contract, so they're probably not going to agree to that one. So that's going to be the point of Thursday. You're going to go back and forth, you and the retailer, the supplier and the retailer, the supplier knowing this value, but not these, and the retailer knowing these values, but not that. You're going to hopefully kind of be able to interpret some of their questions, offers, and responses in a way that allows you to update this so that you will then have more accurate information about how the contract benefits each of you, but you won't, unless you cheat, you won't ever actually know what they want. The goal is to maximize you as a profiter. So the supplier or the retailer who makes the most money is the most successful. So you're going to be doing that, and then you're going to be, you guys might get tired of the buyback contract, and you might say, you know what, let's try revenue sharing. I don't like the buyback contract. Let's do revenue sharing. So you should have this table ready to go. It's really similar. Pretty much all of this is the same. So once you get it set up, you can cut and paste. Almost all of this is the same except revenue share. Oh, yeah, so this is all the same. This obviously is a little bit different. These are going to be different because the way we calculate excess and shortage costs use slightly different formulas. Profit sharing, same here, similar there. This should be really straightforward. We do actually have a wholesale price here. The true profit sharing contract, the wholesale price just equals manufacturing cost. But again, I don't know what the supplier's manufacturing cost is if I'm the retailer, and so they might say, I propose a profit sharing contract with a wholesale price of $3 and a profit share of final total profits of 45%. Or 55% or something like that. So I want to use those numbers, not what I think the production cost is. I want that to be separate so that later I can say, based on what I think their costs are, I think they're taking advantage of me. So we're going to fill all that in. In this case, the supplier's revenue is our thought about their wholesale price. Sorry, their wholesale price offered minus their production cost. If we think they're being honest, that should be 0. Their cost should be their production cost. Sorry, their revenue is going to be the wholesale price times Q. Their cost is going to be their manufacturing cost times Q. If we think they're being honest about their production cost, the supplier's profit then equals this minus this plus the percentage share times the retailer's profit. The retailer's profit, true, and then the retailer's final profit, which is going to be 65% of whatever the percentage you set. It's going to be 1 minus that times what they did earn. So if you set a percentage sharing of 10%, then 90% of their profit they will keep. And so you're going to have to calculate that. And then, of course, total supply chain profit. So so these should all be kind of quick after that. The all contracts model, this one, if you want to set it up, oh, did I not zero that one out for you guys? Oh, look at that. This one, if you want to set it up, you can go in and you could basically plug everything in. What if we have wholesale? What if we have buyback? Whatever. This table, again, is the same as it's been. And what are they doing here? Yeah, so you wouldn't set each value equal at the same time. So you would have things like price plus transportation costs minus adjusted buyback price. So you would basically, if you wanted to, you could just make one sheet. I recommend just ignoring this. If you made one sheet, though, you could go in and kind of say, like, well, let's try a buyback price. So we're going to do 11 and 3, and we're going to make everything else 0, right? And then if my counterpart said, you know what, let's consider instead a revenue sharing contract, I could delete this and go into revenue share and set it equal to, set it equal to maybe 3%. I don't know why they use percentages. Yeah, seriously, just ignore this last table because they have it in different formats than we do. So you're going to want to really just set these 3 up, and then you can flip between screens as you are negotiating. So that's it. Hopefully that helps. If you still have questions, email me or stop by my office. But I'm hoping to avoid 80 people coming to my office today. So hopefully this gives most of you a good start.